The city lights blurred as Anna Montgomery rushed down the sidewalk, gripping her phone in one hand, while struggling to keep her bag from slipping off her shoulder. She had exactly 10 minutes to make it to her interview, and as usual, traffic had worked against her. She tapped frantically on her Uber app, searching for her ride, but the little car icon was stuck 3 blocks away. Her heart pounded. This was her one shot. Flora Chen, Sinclair Enterprises head of HR, wasn't known for giving second chances. If Anna was late, she could kiss this opportunity goodbye. Then, like a beacon of hope, a sleek black Audi pulled up to the curb in front of her. She barely glanced at the tinted windows before throwing open the door and sliding inside. Finally, she muttered breathlessly, shoving her phone into her bag. "Market Street, please. And if you could—" She stopped mid-sentence, eyes widening as she took in the man sitting in the driver's seat. He was not wearing an Uber uniform. In fact, he wasn't even in the driver's seat. A sharp-dressed man in a tailored navy suit sat comfortably, his piercing blue eyes locked on her with a mixture of amusement and confusion. One hand rested casually on the leather armrest, while the other held a phone, which he now set down with deliberate ease. "Miss," he said, his voice smooth and deep, "I think you've mistaken this for your ride." Anna's stomach dropped. Oh no. Her fingers gripped the strap of her bag as her brain short-circuited. How had she not noticed? The luxury interior, the silent, imposing aura of the man staring at her, the lack of an actual driver. All signs she had most definitely just made a huge mistake. She stammered, her face heating up. "Oh my God, I thought this was my Uber." The man lifted a brow, clearly amused. "Do I look like an Uber driver to you?" She swallowed hard. No, of course not. She scrambled to get out, fingers fumbling with the door handle. But before she could bolt, the actual driver opened the door from the outside, blinking at her in surprise. "Sir?" the driver asked, glancing between the two of them. The man, whoever he was, smirked, tilting his head slightly toward Anna. Well, this is a first. Anna wanted the ground to swallow her whole. "I am so sorry," she blurted out. This is the most embarrassing thing I've ever done. I swear I wasn't trying to carjack you or anything." He chuckled, the sound low and rich. "Good to know." She darted out of the car, mortified, barely processing his presence as she dashed toward the actual Uber that had just pulled up behind him. As she climbed in, she stole one last glance at the mystery man, only to find him watching her through the window, a knowing smirk playing at his lips. She had no idea that in just a few minutes, she'd be seeing him again. Anna barely had time to catch her breath as the Uber pulled away from the curb, her heart still pounding from the embarrassing mistake. She squeezed her eyes shut for a second, inhaling deeply to steady herself. "Focus, Anna. This interview is what matters. Not some ridiculously handsome stranger in a suit." The car weaved through traffic, but her mind was still trapped in the awkward encounter. The way the man had looked at her, amused, intrigued, completely unfazed, lingered in her thoughts. There was something undeniably commanding about him, as if he was used to people stepping into his space and immediately knowing who he was. And that smirk? Infuriating. Who even smirks like that in real life? She shook her head, snapping herself out of it as the Uber came to a smooth stop in front of Sinclair Enterprises. The towering glass building gleamed under the morning sun, an intimidating beacon of corporate success. Anna didn't hesitate. This was her moment. Grabbing her bag, she rushed inside, heading straight for the 26th floor, where the interview was set to take place. Her heels clicked against the marble flooring as she stepped into the high-end office space. The receptionist barely glanced up before motioning her toward the waiting area. Anna smoothed down her blouse, inhaling another calming breath. "It's fine. You can do this." "Miss Montgomery?" She shot up from her seat, forcing a professional smile as she turned, only to freeze completely. Standing just a few feet away, with that same knowing smirk, was the man from the car. Her stomach plummeted. Number, this was not happening. Her lips parted slightly, her mind scrambling for a logical explanation, but the words refused to form. "Ah," he said smoothly, slipping his hands into his pockets as he observed her reaction. "We meet again." Anna's heart pounded against her ribs. No, she couldn't breathe. What was he doing here? Unless… Oh no. It hit her like a freight train. Sinclair Enterprises. James Sinclair. The CEO. Her breath hitched. She had stormed into this man's car, snapped at him like he was a low-level Uber driver, and now she was standing in his company, about to be interviewed for a job. This wasn't just a mistake. This was a disaster. James tilted his head slightly, watching the emotions flicker across her face. He looked positively entertained. "Miss Montgomery," a crisp voice cut through her panic. She tore her gaze away from him to find Flora Chen, Sinclair Enterprises HR director, eyeing her with thinly veiled impatience. "You're late." Anna's throat went dry. I got here as fast as I could," she managed, desperately trying to compose herself. Flora's expression remained unreadable. "Follow me." Anna's feet felt like lead as she walked past James, the heat of his gaze burning into her back the entire way. As she stepped into the glass-walled conference room, her mind raced. This was bad. So bad. And somehow, she had the distinct feeling that James Sinclair wasn't going to let her forget it anytime soon. The tension in the conference room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Anna sat stiffly in the plush leather chair, her hands folded in her lap, doing her best to ignore the fact that James Sinclair, the man she had mistaken for an Uber driver, was now seated at the head of the long glass table. She could feel his gaze on her, unreadable, assessing. He had yet to say a word since Flora had started the interview, which somehow made the entire situation even worse. Flora, on the other hand, was as sharp and no-nonsense as Anna had expected. She flipped through Anna's resume with a scrutinizing expression before finally glancing up. "So, Miss Montgomery," she said coolly, "tell me why you think you'd be a good fit for Sinclair Enterprises." Anna took a steadying breath, forcing herself to focus. "I believe my background in interior design, along with my experience working on independent projects, has given me a strong eye for creating spaces that are both functional and aesthetically compelling. I understand how to bring a client's vision to life while balancing practicality and innovation." Flora raised a skeptical brow. "You don't have any experience working with a firm, though. Just freelance work." Anna fought the urge to shift in her seat. "That's true. But I believe that my ability to manage projects independently, handling everything from conceptualization to execution, has given me a well-rounded perspective." Flora didn't look impressed. James finally spoke. "Handling everything?" His voice was smooth, controlled. "That's a bold statement." Anna's breath caught. His tone wasn't outright dismissive, but it carried an undeniable edge of challenge. She met his gaze, pulse racing, determined not to back down. "Yes," she said firmly. I've worked directly with clients, developed designs from scratch, and even coordinated with contractors to ensure proper execution. I know how to handle pressure and problem solve on the spot. Something flickered in James's eyes. Interest, maybe, before he leaned back in his chair, considering her. Flora, however, was far less amused. A corporate setting is very different from working independently. Do you think you'll be able to adapt? Anna refused to let doubt creep in. I know I can. The air in the room shifted slightly, and for a moment, it almost seemed as if Flora was about to dismiss her entirely. But then James spoke again, his voice even but decisive. I want to see what she can do. Flora's head snapped toward him, her lips pressing into a tight line. James, this isn't... You said it yourself, he interrupted smoothly, his gaze still on Anna. She doesn't have firm experience, but that doesn't mean she doesn't have potential. Anna's heart pounded. He wasn't dismissing her. He was giving her a chance. Flora's lips pressed into a thin line, clearly unhappy with James's decision. She exhaled sharply, setting Anna's resume down on the table with deliberate precision. You want to see what she can do? She repeated, her tone making it clear that she found the idea borderline ridiculous. James didn't react. He simply tilted his head slightly, eyes still locked on Anna as if waiting for her to flinch, to fold, to second-guess herself. She didn't. If you don't think I can handle it, then let me prove you wrong, Anna said, her voice steadier than she felt inside. A flicker of something crossed James's face. Amusement, interest, challenge, before he finally leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. Then you'll have your chance. Flora inhaled sharply, clearly holding back a retort. What exactly do you propose? James turned his attention to Flora, his expression unreadable. The Sinclair Enterprises VIP lounge is in desperate need of a redesign. Flora stiffened. That's an internal project, James. We typically assign those to our in-house designers. Then consider this an exception, James said smoothly. Miss Montgomery will submit a proposal. If it meets our standards, we'll discuss next steps. If not, he glanced at Anna, then we'll know she wasn't the right fit. It was a test, a clear-cut challenge, placed before her like a gamble. Anna swallowed. The VIP lounge? That was no small project. It was an exclusive space used by high-profile clients and executives. If she pulled this off, it would be a huge boost to her credibility. But if she failed? She didn't have the luxury of failure. Flora still didn't look pleased, but she relented. Fine, she said crisply, turning back to Anna. You'll have 1 week to submit a full proposal, including conceptual sketches, mood boards, and a projected timeline. If it's not up to standard, don't expect any second chances. Anna nodded, pulse racing. Understood. James watched her closely for another second before standing. Then we're done here. He buttoned his suit jacket with effortless ease, as if this entire encounter had been nothing more than an afterthought. Anna, however, was still grappling with what had just happened. She had walked into this room expecting an interview. She was leaving with an opportunity. As she rose from her seat, she felt James's gaze on her again, assessing, measuring. Don't disappoint me, Miss Montgomery, he said simply, then turned and walked out. Anna exhaled, tension coiling in her spine. She had 1 week to prove she deserved this. As she exited the conference room, Chloe's words echoed in her mind. Be careful, Anna. Men like him, they don't give opportunities without expecting something in return. She didn't know if that was true, but she was about to find out. The next few days blurred together in a whirlwind of research, sketching, and caffeine-fueled brainstorming sessions. Anna spent every waking hour poring over designs, pulling inspiration from luxury interiors, balancing bold innovation with the sleek professionalism that a company like Sinclair Enterprises demanded. But despite her relentless focus, she couldn't shake one problem: James Sinclair. He was a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. The way he had watched her in that interview, not dismissive, not amused, but something else, something calculating. And then there was the fact that she was now designing a space for his company, under his direct approval. The same man whose car she had practically hijacked just days ago. She groaned, rubbing her temples. "Focus, Anna. He doesn't matter. The project does." At least that was what she told herself. But she knew the moment she presented her design, she would have to face him again. And she wasn't sure if she was ready for that. The sound of a pencil scratching against paper filled Anna's tiny apartment as she hunched over her drafting table, surrounded by an explosion of fabric swatches, digital renderings, and color samples. She had been working non-stop for the past 4 days, balancing between exhaustion and an almost manic determination to make this project perfect. She had to get this right. Sinclair Enterprises wasn't just another corporate firm. It was one of the biggest names in luxury business spaces. If she could impress James Sinclair with her design, it could open doors she had only dreamed of. But that was easier said than done, because James Sinclair was impossible to read. He hadn't spoken to her since the interview, but she knew he was watching. Flora had sent an email confirming the date of her proposal presentation, and Anna had no doubt that James himself had dictated the deadline, and she would be ready. Or at least, she was trying to be. Anna ran a hand through her hair, staring at the 3 variations of her concept. Each one was bold in its own way. The first played with sleek minimalism, balancing dark wood and brushed steel. The second introduced warm, rich textures, creating a space that was both powerful and inviting. The third, her personal favorite, was a seamless blend of both, sophisticated but daring, sharp yet undeniably welcoming. She tapped her pen against the table, biting her lip. Which one would James choose? More importantly, which one would impress him the most? A knock at the door snapped her out of her thoughts. "Ugh, Chloe, please tell me you brought coffee," she called, already dragging herself toward the door. But when she swung it open, it wasn't Chloe standing there. It was Ryan Carter. Dressed in a perfectly fitted blazer and an infuriatingly confident smirk, James's best friend and business partner leaned against the doorframe, a to-go coffee in one hand and a manila folder in the other. Anna blinked. "What are you doing here?" Ryan lifted the coffee. "You asked for caffeine." She folded her arms, unimpressed. "I asked Chloe for caffeine." "Well, that's disappointing. I thought you'd be more excited to see me." He handed her the coffee anyway. Anna took it begrudgingly, eyeing him. "And what's in the folder?" Ryan grinned, stepping inside without an invitation. "Oh, just something James wanted you to have." Anna's stomach twisted. She shut the door and turned to face him, arms still crossed. "And what exactly would that be?" Ryan set the folder on her cluttered table, tapping it lightly. "A list of restrictions for your design. Some non-negotiables according to the great James Sinclair." Anna groaned. "You've got to be kidding me." "Oh, I never kid when it comes to my best friend's impossible standards," Ryan said cheerfully. "You're learning that now." Anna didn't know whether to scream or throw the coffee at him. Anna snatched up the folder and flipped it open, her eyes scanning the neatly typed list of restrictions that James had apparently deemed non-negotiable. Her irritation grew with every line. No bold color schemes. No unnecessary artistic embellishments. Minimal use of texture contrast. Strict adherence to Sinclair Enterprises' signature design aesthetic. Final layout must be approved before any execution begins. Anna let out a frustrated sigh and looked up at Ryan. So basically, he wants something cold, corporate, and completely devoid of personality? Ryan grinned, clearly enjoying her reaction. I mean, I wouldn't phrase it like that. But yes. Anna tossed the folder onto the table, crossing her arms. What's the point of hiring a designer if he just wants a carbon copy of what he already has? Ryan shrugged, still maddeningly amused. Because James likes control, and he doesn't take well to surprises. Anna scoffed. Well, he's in for one. Ryan raised a brow. You planning to ignore his rules? She thought about it. A safe approach might get her through the door, but would it make her stand out? Would it make James see her as more than just another designer? Number Anna took a long sip of coffee, gaze flicking back to her designs. I'm planning to give him exactly what he doesn't know he needs, she said finally. Ryan laughed. Oh, I like you. She rolled her eyes. Great. Now leave so I can actually get some work done. Ryan held up his hands in surrender and headed for the door. Can't wait to see how this turns out. Anna spent the next 3 days refining her proposal, fine-tuning every detail, pushing the boundaries just enough to challenge Sinclair's rigid guidelines without outright defying them. The morning of the presentation, she stood outside Sinclair Enterprises' glass-walled conference room, heart hammering. Inside, James sat at the head of the table, completely unreadable, his gaze flicking briefly to her before returning to his laptop. Flora stood beside him, arms crossed, looking like she was already prepared to reject whatever Anna had prepared. And then there was Jacob Foster, seated casually at the far end of the room, watching the proceedings with a smirk that sent alarm bells ringing in her head. What the hell was he doing here? She didn't have time to figure it out. The moment the doors closed behind her, Flora gestured for her to begin. Anna swallowed, steadying herself. This was it. She clicked the remote and her designs appeared on the large screen behind her. For a brief second, silence filled the room. Then James's gaze sharpened. This, he said slowly, eyes locked onto her, is not what I asked for. Anna met his stare head-on. No, she said. It's better. A slow, dangerous smile curled at the edge of James's lips. Convince me. Anna stood tall, shoulders squared, as James's words hung in the air. Convince me. She had been expecting resistance, anticipating it, but hearing the challenge in his voice, seeing the way his piercing blue eyes dared her to justify her work, sent a shiver down her spine. She clicked the remote, advancing the slide to reveal her concept breakdown. Your original request emphasized minimalism, neutrality, and adherence to the Sinclair Enterprises' existing design aesthetic. She began, her voice steady. But I believe that approach misses the core purpose of this lounge. James leaned back in his chair, watching her intently. Anna continued, shifting her weight slightly. This space isn't just a waiting area. It's a statement. Every executive, every potential investor who steps through these doors should feel power, exclusivity, and prestige. A cold, lifeless space won't inspire confidence. It won't make them stay. She advanced the slide again, displaying a sleek, bold reinterpretation of the Sinclair aesthetic. It maintained the sophistication and refinement that Sinclair Enterprises was known for, but with a richer depth, deep wood tones, understated luxury in the textures, subtle gold accents that didn't overpower but enhanced the experience. James's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Flora, however, was far less subtle in her reaction. She exhaled sharply, arms still crossed. "This is a drastic departure from what was asked." Anna didn't flinch. "It's an improvement." A quiet chuckle came from the far end of the table. Jacob Foster. Well, well, he mused, tapping his fingers against the table. "Looks like we have someone who isn't afraid to challenge Sinclair himself. That's refreshing." Anna's jaw tightened at his tone. There was something about him that felt off. James ignored Jacob entirely, his focus still on Anna. "You took liberties with the brief." "I saw an opportunity to make it better," she countered. A pause. Then, instead of reprimanding her, James simply said, "Walk me through it." Anna's pulse raced. He wasn't dismissing it outright. He was listening. She took a steadying breath and dove into the details, explaining the intentional choices behind each element, how every texture and material had been selected to create a subconscious sense of influence and status. She was completely in her element, her passion threading through every word. And James was watching her, like he was seeing something he hadn't expected. As Anna continued her presentation, she could feel the energy in the room shift. The initial skepticism from Flora and the unreadable intensity from James had morphed into something else, something closer to intrigue. She advanced another slide, revealing a 3D rendering of the proposed space, a seamless blend of modern power and timeless elegance. The lounge exuded authority, sophistication, and an understated grandeur that felt distinctly Sinclair Enterprises, but with a vision that went beyond the safe, expected aesthetic. She turned toward James. "The current design philosophy you follow works. It's sleek, professional, efficient, but it lacks warmth, personality. Clients and executives shouldn't just see Sinclair Enterprises as a place of business. They should feel its influence, its prestige, the moment they step inside. This redesign doesn't change your brand. It enhances it." James didn't say anything for a long moment. Anna kept her gaze locked onto his, refusing to show even a hint of uncertainty. Then, without breaking eye contact, he leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the table. "What makes you so sure this will work?" It wasn't said with doubt. It was a challenge. Anna inhaled slowly, pressing the remote once more to reveal her final slide, a detailed breakdown of research she had conducted on top-tier corporate environments, the psychology of luxury spaces, and how subtle design choices influenced decision-making at a subconscious level. "I studied the environments that truly successful companies create," she said. "The ones that don't just impress their clients, but make them want to stay. This concept isn't just about aesthetics. It's about retention, about creating an environment where people feel compelled to do business with Sinclair Enterprises." The room was silent. Even Jacob Foster, who had been watching with detached amusement earlier, now seemed more focused, his smirk faltering slightly as he studied the data on the screen. Flora, arms still crossed, let out a quiet sigh and glanced at James. "She has a point." That caught Anna off guard. James finally looked away from her to Flora, his expression unreadable. "You agree?" Flora exhaled through her nose, clearly reluctant but unwilling to deny the facts. "I wouldn't have given her the time of day if it were up to me."